Ruby Ridge incident was a bloody 1992 siege, where the U.S. government's botched operation led to the deaths of a mother, a child, and a federal agent, fueling anti-government fury for decades. Randy Weaver, a former Iowa factory worker and U.S. Army soldier, moved with his wife and 4 children to northern Idaho during the 1980s so they could homeschool his children and escape what he and his wife Vicki saw as a corrupted world. In 1984, Randy Weaver and his neighbor Terry Kinnison had a dispute over a $3,000 land deal. Kinnison lost the ensuing lawsuit and was ordered to pay Weaver an additional $2,100 in court costs and damages. Kinnison wrote letters to the FBI, the Secret Service, and the county sheriff in which he alleged that Weaver had threatened to kill Pope John Paul II, President Ronald Reagan, and Idaho Governor John V. Evans. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, first became aware of Weaver in July 1986, when he was introduced to a confidential ATF informant at a meeting at the World Aryan Congress. The informant portrayed himself as a weapons dealer working with motorcycle gangs. Weaver had been invited to the meeting by Cumnick, the original target of the ATF investigation. It was Weaver's first time at this Congress. In October 1989, the ATF claimed that Weaver sold the informant 2 sawed-off shotguns, with the overall length of the guns shorter than the limit set by federal law. The charges stemmed from Weaver's sale of a sawed-off shotgun to an undercover federal informant who had induced him to modify the firearm below the legal barrel length. In June 1990, Byerly attempted to use the sawed-off shotgun charge as leverage to get Weaver to act as an informant for his investigation into Aryan nations. Weaver refused to become a snitch, and the ATF filed the gun charges in June 1990. The ATF alleged that Weaver was a bank robber with criminal convictions. Those claims were false. At that time, Weaver had no criminal record. The 1995 Senate investigation found Weaver was not a suspect in any bank robberies. On January 22nd, the judge in the case appointed attorney Everett Hoffmeister as Weaver's legal representative. On February 5th, the trial date was changed from February 19th to 20th to give participants more travel time following a federal holiday. On February 7th, probation officer Carl Richens sent Weaver a letter indicating that he had the case file and needed to talk with Weaver. This letter erroneously said that Weaver's trial date was March 20th.
When Weaver did not appear in court on February 20th, Judge Harold Ryan issued a bench warrant for failure to appear in court. Upon finding a copy of the letter, the chief probation officer, Terrence Hummel, contacted Ryan's clerk and informed them of the incorrect date in the letter. Hummel also contacted the U.S. Marshals Service and Weaver's attorney, informing them both of the error. Judge Ryan, however, refused to withdraw the bench warrant. The U.S. Attorney's Office called a grand jury on March 14th. The USAO did not inform the grand jury of Richens' letter, and the grand jury issued an indictment for failure to appear. When the Weaver case passed from the ATF to the USMS, no one informed the marshals that the ATF had attempted to solicit Weaver as an informant. As the law enforcement arm of the federal courts, the USMS were responsible to arrest and bring in Weaver, now considered a fugitive. Weaver was known to have an intense distrust of government. The erroneous Richens' letter is believed to have compounded this sentiment and may have contributed to Weaver's reluctance to appear for trial. He was suspicious of what he thought were inconsistent messages from the government and his lawyer. He began to think there was a conspiracy against him. His distrust grew even further when Hoffmeister erroneously told him that if he lost the trial, he would lose his land, essentially leaving Vicki homeless, and that the government would take away his children. Following a flyover by a hired helicopter for Geraldo Rivera's Now It Can Be Told television show, on April 18, 1992, the USMS received media reports that Weaver had shot at the helicopter. That day in Idaho, U.S. Marshals were installing surveillance cameras overlooking the Weaver property. In a field report dated April 18, 1992, Marshal W. Warren Mays noted the sighting of a helicopter near the Weaver property, but did not report hearing any gunfire. When interviewed by the FBI, the helicopter pilot Richard Weiss said that Weaver had not fired on his helicopter.
On August 21, 1992, 6 marshals were sent to scout the area to determine suitable places away from the cabin to apprehend and arrest Weaver. The marshals, dressed in military camouflage, were equipped with night vision goggles and M16 rifles. At one point, Roderick threw 2 rocks at the Weaver cabin to test the dog's reaction. Later, the dog Stryker began following the agents. Weaver's friend Kevin Harris and Weaver's 14-year-old son, Samuel, emerged and followed Stryker to investigate. Harris and the younger Weaver said that they were hoping the dog had noticed a game animal as the cabin was out of meat. Samuel and Harris followed Stryker on foot through the woods while Randy, also on foot, took a separate logging trail. Vicky, Sarah, Rachel, and baby Elisheba remained at the cabin. When the marshal's position was revealed by the dog Stryker, a yellow Labrador retriever, DUSM Roderick shot and killed the dog. Seeing this, Samuel Weaver reportedly said to the marshals, "You've killed my dog, you son of a bitch." Component placement and then shot in the direction of Roderick. DUSM Cooper then shot towards Samuel Weaver and Kevin Harris, who both sought cover. Harris, once finding cover behind a tree stump, then returned fire with a shot that killed DUSM William Deegan Jr. Samuel Weaver, now retreating up a hill, was then shot in the back and killed by DUSM Cooper. In the aftermath of the gunfight on August 21st, DUSM Hunt requested immediate support from Idaho law enforcement, and he also alerted the FBI by notifying it that a marshal had been killed. On August 22nd, the second day of the siege, between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m., the FBI HRT Sniper Yasari observer teams were briefed and deployed to the cabin on foot. Before the negotiators arrived at the cabin, FBI sniper Lon Horiuchi, from a position over 200 yards, 180 meters, north and above the Weaver cabin, shot and wounded Randy Weaver in the back, with the bullet exiting his right armpit, while he was lifting the latch on the shed to visit the body of his dead son. As Weaver, his 16-year-old daughter Sarah, and Harris ran back toward the cabin, Horiuchi fired a second bullet, wounding Harris in the chest. This bullet killed Vicky Weaver, who was standing behind the door of the cabin when Harris entered. Vicky was holding the Weaver's 10-month-old baby, Elisheba. The FBI's HQ and the site commanders in Idaho both re-evaluated the situation based on information about what had happened on August 21st, which they were receiving from U.S. Marshals Hunt, Cooper, and Roderick. On August 23rd, repeated attempts to negotiate with Weaver via a bullhorn failed. There was no response from the cabin. On about Monday, August 24th, the fourth day of the siege, FBI Deputy Assistant Director Danny Coulson, who did not know that Vicky Weaver had been killed, wrote a memo about the Weaver's legal position. He wrote, "Something to consider. Charge against Weaver is bullshit. No one saw Weaver do any shooting. Vicky has no charges against her, in Weaver's defense. He ran down the hill to see what dog was barking at. Some guys in camouflage shot his dog, started shooting at him, killed his son. Harris did the shooting. He is in pretty strong legal position." The standoff was ultimately resolved by civilian negotiators, including Bo Gritz, to whom Weaver agreed to speak. The wounded Harris, who had earlier urged Weaver for a mercy killing, was convinced by Gritz's mediation to surrender on Sunday, August 30th. Harris was removed from the property via stretcher and was then flown by a medical evacuation helicopter, a Bell UH-1N belonging to the U.S. Air Force, to Sacred Heart Medical Center in Spokane. Weaver allowed the removal of his wife's body, which Gritz oversaw. Bo Gritz and FBI agents escort Randy Weaver down the mountain on August 31st, 1992. The FBI HRT commander gave Gritz a deadline to get the remaining Weavers to surrender, and if they did not surrender on the day of the deadline, he said he would resolve the standoff by launching a tactical assault. Weaver and his daughters surrendered the next day. Both Harris and Weaver were arrested. Harris was in serious condition at Sacred Heart, but U.S. Marshals did not allow his parents to see him until Monday evening after a federal court order was issued. Weaver's daughters were released to the custody of relatives. Federal officials considered charging Sarah, who was 16, as an adult.
Weaver and Harris were charged with a variety of offenses. Their trial in U.S. District Court in Boise began in April 1993, and it was presided over by Judge Edward Lodge. Weaver was ultimately acquitted of all of the charges, except the charge which he incurred after he missed his original court date, and the charge of violating his bail conditions. Defense counsels for Weaver and Harris alleged throughout their 1993 trial that agents of the ATF, USMS, and FBI were themselves guilty of serious wrongdoing. The Department of Justice created the Ruby Ridge Task Force to investigate events.
Randy Weaver and his daughters filed a wrongful death suit for $200 million, which was related to the killing of his wife and son. In an out-of-court settlement in August 1995, the federal government awarded Randy Weaver $100,000 and it also awarded $1 million to each of his 3 daughters. The government did not admit that it had committed any wrongdoing in relation to the deaths of Samuel and Vicky. On the condition of anonymity, a DOJ official told the Washington Post that he believed that the Weavers would have probably won the full amount if the case had gone to trial. The attorney for Harris pressed Harris's civil suit for damages, but federal officials vowed that they would never pay someone who had killed a U.S. Marshal. In September 2000, Harris was awarded a $380,000 settlement by the government.
In 1997, Boundary County prosecutor Denise Woodbury indicted FBI HRT sniper Lon Horiuchi for manslaughter on state charges. But in 1998, the trial was removed to federal court because Horiuchi had been acting in the line of duty as a federal law enforcement officer. Judge Lodge quickly dismissed the case on grounds of sovereign immunity. The decision to dismiss charges was reversed in 2001 by the Ninth Circuit, which held that enough uncertainty about the facts of the case existed for Horiuchi to stand trial on state manslaughter charges. But Boundary County prosecutor Brett Benson decided to drop the case.
The Weaver family, including Randy, later moved to Kalispell, Montana. Sarah and the other 2 Weaver daughters are employed there. In 2012, Sarah Weaver said that she forgives the federal agents who killed her mother and brother. Randy Weaver died on May 11, 2022, at the age of 74.
American domestic terrorists Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols claimed that their desire for revenge for the federal government's poor handling of the Ruby Ridge and Waco sieges motivated them to perpetrate the Oklahoma City bombing. On April 19, 1995, the second anniversary of the fire that ended the Waco siege, they detonated a truck bomb in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building during business hours. 168 people were killed and 680 people were injured, mostly U.S. government employees. Let me know in the comments what you think. And while you're at it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps.